there's a man that is talked about and many people really do not know a whole lot about. In fact, we just brought him up in the last show for the very first time. And his name is Stanley Plotkin. Now, Stanley Plotkin is arguably the most powerful vaccinologist in the world. This man is put up, next to Salk and the other great leaders, Jenner, of our vaccine program. He has made more vaccines than any living person alive. We're going to start discussing him for many reasons, but before I sing his praises, let's see what his own fans have to say about him themselves. This is Stanley.
It is my great honor to use the Stanley Plotkin gavel to open this meeting.
It's our good friend and colleague, Dr. Stan Plotkin.
Dr. Plotkin.
Virtually every country in the world is affected by his vaccines.
He was involved in pivotal trials on anthrax, oral polio, rabies vaccine,
Rubella vaccine, the rotavirus vaccine, rabies.
He has earned the Distinguished Physician Award of the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society, the Finland Award of the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases, the Hilleman Award of the American Society for Microbiology, the French Legion of Honor, and the Bruce Medal in Preventive Medicine.
He's a member of the Institute of Medicine and the French Academy of Medicine.
One of the very special things about him is the global impact that he's had, not just from the products, but from his book.
He developed the standard textbook for vaccines in 1988.
Bill Gates calls his book a Bible for vaccinologists.
I hope you all have indeed have read the book, and I hope it's more accurate than the Bible.
He trained just a generation of scientists, including myself, to think like he thinks.
So we talked about it before. This is literally the Bible on vaccines, and as Stanley Plotkin points out, he believes it's more accurate than the Bible itself. So obviously a very important book. And last year, I believe it was January of last year, Stanley Plotkin volunteered to go under oath, sit in front of a camera in a 9-hour deposition for what was essentially a tiny little custody battle going on in Michigan. And the results of that are 9 hours of testimony by Dr. Stanley Plotkin of the questions we have always wanted to ask. And so today we're introducing a brand new segment on the High Wire, because I'm not going to go through all 9 hours today. Every week we're going to leave you a little piece of Plotkin on vaccines. Okay, so for this week's episode of Plotkin on vaccines, I want to set up this discussion because I was just down in Mississippi last week where they're trying once again to pass a religious exemption. Mississippi joins West Virginia and California as the only states in the entire country that do not allow any exemptions, not a religious or a personal belief exemption. Of course, they have a medical exemption, which I call, that's like the witchcraft exemption, meaning if you sink, you can get it. If you drown, you can have it. If your child's injured, then we will give you this. So it's an injury exemption, which is what a medical exemption is. But they want a religious exemption. And as they pointed out, in the South, which is the Bible Belt, they're the outlier. They're the ones that aren't allowing for a religious exemption. And one of the reasons they talk about a religious exemption is the use of aborted fetal cell lines in the vaccines. Now, here's the thing about this discussion, and I said it when I went down to Mississippi last week. I said, I hear all sorts of points about this aborted fetal cell lines in vaccines. Some people will say, well, you know what, let them say it themselves. This is Senator Richard Pan as he's trying to pass SB 277, which made us just like Mississippi and took all of our exemptions away. This is what Senator Pan had to say about aborted fetal cell lines in vaccines.
When we're looking at all of the vaccinations, many are created with aborted fetal cells. On all these vaccinations, are there alternatives that are not created from aborted fetal cells?
So I would, first of all, vaccines are not made from aborted fetal cells. That, unfortunately, is a myth.
Okay. That's the guy that wrote SB 277. That's the guy that says we shouldn't be listening to anti-vaxxers because they don't know what they're talking about. I'm a pediatrician. I do this every day, and I know what I'm talking about. So Senator Richard Pan sold SB 277 in California on the fact that herd immunity was at risk, which I have pointed out multiple times. You can see videos on it that herd immunity is actually the real myth, if we're going to talk about myths. But Pan believes that there's no aborted fetal cell lines in vaccines. So I've heard that. I hear that from politicians all the time. I've even heard people in health departments say that. But then there's another version that I hear, which is what Paul Offit says right here.
One question that some parents are concerned about is whether or not vaccines are made using fetal cells. And the answer to that question is yes, there are a few vaccines that are made that way. There were two elective abortions that were performed in the early 1960s. One was performed in England, the other was performed in Sweden, and those two elective abortions then created cells which have been used ever since.
So there you have. Then there was two abortions, and he's really specific about it, so you really get this through. That Sweden, and I think he said England, and these two abortions are used, and that's it. So those two abortions really a long time ago. But as Paul Offit himself said, we've all learned to think like Stanley Plotkin because he's the greatest. The man who has literally been on the board of almost every vaccine maker, I believe, in the world, has made millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars making vaccines. I think to end this discussion once and for all, and this is, by the way, this is just one of many discussions we're going to get to end because Dr. Plotkin put himself in front of a camera for a deposition. So in his own words, is there fetal cell lines being used in vaccines by the king, by the godfather of vaccines? Here it is, in his own words, Plotkin on vaccines.
Have you ever worked on developing a vaccine that was eventually used by the public?
Yes.
Okay. Which ones?
Well, rubella, rotavirus, rabies, and I've made contributions here and there to anthrax, cytomegalovirus, varicella.
Your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses have been part of that work?
My own personal work, 2.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 41. Okay. Are you familiar with this article, Dr. Plotkin?
Yes.
Okay. Are you listed as an author on this article?
Yes.
Okay. This study took place at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
You were at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
How many fetuses were used in the study described in this article?
Quite a few.
So this study involved 74 fetuses, correct?
I don't remember exactly how many.
To turn to page 12 of the study.
Yeah, 76.
76.
Mm-hmm.
And these fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And these were all normally developed fetuses, correct?
Yes.
What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
Well, I didn't personally harvest any, but a whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes.
And they were cultured?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Included the lung of the fetuses?
Yes.
Okay. Included the skin?
Yes.
Kidney?
Yes.
Spleen?
Yes.
Heart?
Yes.
Okay. And tongue?
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your entire career, and this was just one study, so I'm going to ask you again. In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally, before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Do you have any sense? I mean, this one study had 76. How many other studies did you have that you used aborted fetuses for?
Oh, I don't remember how many.
You're aware? Are you aware that one of the objections to vaccination by the plaintiff in this case is the inclusion of aborted fetal tissue in the development of vaccines, and the fact that it's actually part of the ingredients of vaccines?
Yeah, I'm aware of those objections. The Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that which says that individuals who need the vaccines should receive the vaccines regardless of the fact, and that I think it implies that I am the individual who will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which I am glad to do.
Okay. Do you know if the mother is Catholic?
I have no idea.
Okay.
No.
Do you take issue with religious beliefs?
Yes.
Okay. You have said that, quote, vaccination is always under attack by religious zealots who believe that the will of God includes death and disease?
Yes.
You stand by that statement?
I absolutely do.
Okay. Are you an atheist?
Yes.
End of story. Mic drop. That's essentially what, there was a couple of politicians in Mississippi, we played that video, and one of the senators came out and said, I think that was the biggest mic drop I've ever seen in my life.